everyone, welcome to the weekly recap. This is either going to be 2 videos completely or 1 probably long video. And that's going to
we'll see how it flows and then we'll go from there.
So
definitely.
Lots of interconnected topics, lots of big topics that really connect to each other.
Yeah, 2018 is off to a good start for topics.
Definitely. So we'll see how these ideas connect together and make a decision as we go here. But one of the first things I wanted to mention is actually something I think a lot of people aren't super aware of or don't pay a lot of attention to, which is CES.
Yes, yeah.
So Sony did their CES conference, and we both did manage to catch that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very, very short.
Very short. About an hour?
No, it was like 15 minutes or so, I think, like 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, it seemed that way to me. If it wasn't, we'll go back and check it.
There was just a few things, really.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned some numbers, which is cool. I actually missed that part of Sony, the one that would get on stage and put up a chart or a graph.
Give out all those numbers.
Yeah, they used to do that a long time ago. Even at E3, they would put up these charts and graphs. And unless I'm imagining this, I remember it going on for like 15 or 20 minutes at one point.
Like a business meeting.
Yeah, and
executive meeting.
They've moved away from that over the years, and they give a little bit less information each time.
But this time they did.
Yeah.
They did give us some info,
so
which we'll get to a little bit later. But what I thought was kind of interesting was this huge focus on robotics.
Yeah, they have that robot dog that they're pushing.
The robot dog. Yeah. And they're talking about kind of the future of AI, but that's the only tangible thing that they have right now. That reminds me, of course, we're talking about Sony as a whole, but that reminds me of the gaming division and their focus on VR.
Yeah, it does. Well, also don't forget that dog, there was a moment where Kaz Hirai is talking to it and it didn't react to him the way it was supposed to. Yeah. So that's kind of embarrassing. It's interesting that they continue to try to push stuff like VR, like the robot dog and things that don't have a great adoption rate, don't have a great attach rate.
Yeah, so that's why I say it reminds me of VR. Yes, I'm sure you can sell robot dogs and I'm sure you can sell VR, but that's definitely not what your core customer wants. Yeah. Sony's core is not robotics whatsoever, and then Sony's gaming core is not VR.
Yeah.
But they do continue to put a lot of R&D and a lot of money into these initiatives, which is really interesting. I would say that Sony, we've seen it. We've seen where Sony's revenue comes from. They need to put their money into gaming.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the R&D money that's going into things like robotics and things like that could really help out in gaming because we know that's their profitable division. But that also needs to be the general gamer.
Yeah, I think
not the VR gamer so much because that's expensive technology. So you're automatically not going to have... a massive adoption rate, even if it does what they would consider to do well.
With version 2 of their PSVR, you're back up to $500. Yeah. And then really, if you buy all the devices and all the things you need, you're quite a bit over that from my estimation, yeah.
So something that I'm going to mention, because it goes into the numbers that we got from CES, so this will continue into the conversation, is we had a comment on our last video when we were talking about kind of attach rates and things like that. And to sum up the comment, this is from United Killa Gaming.
Yeah, so he's a killer, but he does he unites with people to do that. So
unites
that's
killers.
Good. He's into online modes, I'm guessing. Yeah,
it's got to be. But don't forget the gaming.
Yeah, that's important.
Killa Gaming. So essentially, to sum up what he said, okay, yes, hardware sales don't equate to profitability. I get that, but how would I play the software without the hardware? He goes on to say, everyone's saying Horizon and Uncharted should be selling better with a 70 million install base. So what about The Witcher 3? It sold 10 million on 120 plus million install base. So is that bad?
Well, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but he's twisting the way the numbers work on that, right?
Yeah.
Because Witcher 3... it was multi-plat, and it sold 6 million literally out of the gate.
Yeah.
Immediately,
right
6
when
million.
It released.
And the bulk of the other, if he's right about 10 million, the bulk of that other 4 million is going to come within the months following that.
Right.
And it's going to continue to sell year after year, but not beating those initial numbers.
Right.
So when that happened, that was what, May 2015, right?
Yeah.
Much smaller
install base.
Yeah, well, you had only 40 million PS4s, I believe.
Around, yeah, something like that.
And then, if you believe what people were pushing back then, there was only 10 million Xboxes out there.
So a remarkably smaller number, much less than half of what we've got out there now.
And then in PCs, the PCs that had to run that, a lot of people were still in the process of upgrading at that time. So not as many PCs could run that as you would probably believe.
Right.
So the numbers actually were pretty small if you look at what he's saying. So his own argument is proving kind of what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because 10 million on 120 million install base, which it wasn't that big at that time at all. Yeah. It was much smaller than that. Smaller. But even if it was that, 10 million would be, let's just kind of cut the really small PC sector just for the sake of simplicity and say you have two platforms. You have Xbox and PlayStation. Yeah. 10 million, 5 and 5, again, realizing it doesn't actually split equally. That would still be very, very impressive.
That's still a lot better.
Because Witcher is kind of a niche game. Yeah. It's not something everybody plays, and that's what you have to consider. One of the points that I would make to that comment. Well,
and this guy didn't specify whether he's talking about Horizon Zero Dawn or any of those games that we were talking about.
Right. He mentioned Horizon Zero Dawn and Uncharted should be selling more, and that's what people are saying, but he didn't specify. And so even if you figure, you have to consider multiplats differently. I would consider, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you think differently, exclusives would be a very high attach, you would think.
You would think,
Big
you
exclusives.
Would hope so.
You would hope that they would be one of your higher attaches because with multiplats, there's way more multiplats out in a year than most people can afford, so they're not going to play every one of them. Yeah. They're not going to buy every one of them, so they're going to pick the genres that they like or the games that they like or the devs that they like, and they're going to pick a select few. So if Witcher 3 is one of those multiplats, that I would very much consider that game to be in a niche because it's a complicated game. Not everybody loves that game.
Yeah.
So if it sold that many,
it's outselling the games that
it's outselling the big exclusives that we're talking about. Because we know that Horizon Zero Dawn is somewhere between 3.4 and will be very lucrative here and say between 3.4 and 4 million.
It's got to be over 4 million by now.
So the last number we found was a little while back and was
3.4. Yeah, was the last number. But so it's got to be over 4.
The case,
you would expect it with as many PS4s you have out there. You expect that to be, I would say, quite a bit higher.
A higher attach rate because it's the big exclusive of 2017.
With much less Xbox Ones out there. You've heard, Halo being, upwards of 6 million and Gears having over 6 million players, most likely over 5 million in units sold of their game.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that we're seeing.
That number does equate to what we're saying. It equates to the exclusives not selling as well as sort of a, one genre multiplat. And that would mean that Horizon Zero Dawn probably should have hit a higher target.
Yeah, Horizon should have hit a higher target, especially, having all those PS4s out there. So it's a weird argument that he has, saying that we're spreading misinformation. Also, how is it misinformation when we're just speculating on...
Right, it was all speculation to begin with. But it's interesting because when you start to play with those numbers, and we have some even better numbers to play with, you really do start to see that there is something weird going on there. Yeah. It actually does back us up. So here's some numbers that we got out of CES. Best part of CES was they did announce some of their numbers. Yes. One of the numbers they announced is 73.6 million PS4s sold. So they also announced how many games they've sold.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Software, digital download, and physical. 645 million copies of games since the debut of the PS4.
So you're talking about over the course of the entire generation for PS4.
Right. We're talking since November of 2013.
So you hear that number. Say that number again.
645 million. And you're like, whoa. 645
million. So it sounds
huge.
Unbelievably.
Sounds really impressive, which I think was fully what their intent was in presenting this number. 73.6 million is also an impressive install base.
Yes, yeah.
But when you take the 645 million and you divide it amongst the 73.6 million owners, and again, we're being a little generous there because they haven't had that big of an install base throughout the time that they have been throughout the generation.
This is the numbers that Sony put forward, so you have to go with what they're telling you.
So if we use the current number of PS4s out there in the world, and we use the current amount of games that have been sold. So 645 million divided up amongst all the PlayStations out there is about 9 games per console.
9 games.
A period of time, so 9 games per console out there in the world.
Yeah.
In a period of time around 4 years and 2 months.
So 9 game attach rate.
So 9 games per PS4 that exists out there.
Yeah.
In 4 years and 2 months, in the generation as a whole. When you divide those two numbers, though, you find out that's roughly 2 games per year per console.
Yes. So this ties directly back into the very thing that we were talking about, the very thing that guy called us out on that comment,
right?
That the games on the PS4 have not really been selling this generation.
Yeah, there's definitely a problem with the way that they're selling.
2 games per year for the 4 years is basically the attach rate that has been
of PS4 as a generation.
A PS4, yeah. So I mean that's pretty bad.
That's a fascinating number.
That's a really weird number. Why would something like that be happening? What do you think about?
You know, that's the interesting thing. So I would tie this to a comment, actually, that Phil Spencer has said in Xbox interviews, which is that the exclusives are no longer really the end-all, be-all. He's looking at numbers. You know, people are always wanting more exclusives, more exclusives. Of course, that's what we all want. That makes sense to us all.
Yeah.
But what he said is they're not selling as well as you would expect or as well as they did in previous years.
I remember that interview, and he was criticized for that quite heavily.
Yeah, and essentially, you know, he's looking at numbers and he's saying, you know, you have to hit, and we've discussed it in a recent video, you have how much money you put into the game, then you have how much money you have to put into maintaining the game, and all of that is just your basic break even. You've got to make a lot more money than that, double of that at the very least, to actually be profitable off of a game.
Yes, yeah.
So essentially what he was saying is these big exclusives aren't hitting whatever that metric is. So that's an interesting thing coming from the opposite side, coming from Xbox. We don't have Xbox's numbers on any of this. Yeah. Xbox really went to a mantra quite a long time ago of not announcing specific numbers, specific software attaches. All of that is kind of speculation.
I really wish they would announce exactly how many consoles they have. Just to, you know, pull this up to compare to what Sony's put out there. How many consoles they have, and then how many games they've sold for the generation thus far. Just
those same numbers.
I think it'd be very interesting.
That would be so fascinating.
And my guess is that people would probably be kind of shocked.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And, you know, here's the funny thing. We've always said in a lot of our earlier videos up to very recently that we were always upset that we couldn't find out what was going on with Sony.
Yeah.
They never did, you know, big announcements and press conferences. They were just very under the radar for a very long time. And it's kind of funny that we're now finding ourselves where as much info as Microsoft has given us over the years, they don't give us one major thing that Sony does, and that's the numbers, because it would be fascinating to compare that.
Well, they talk about their Xbox Live numbers, so, I mean, I think that's
we know kind of their subscription numbers.
Yeah, it's over 50 million.
Yeah.
And then Sony also mentioned in the CES that they're at 31.5 million for paid subscriptions.
Yeah, so I'm just making sure I just heard you. You said 50 million gold members, right?
Not necessarily.
Paid subscribers to Xbox Live?
They have never been 100% specific. Microsoft never been specific. I've heard as much as 55 million. There was a report that came out in one article that actually said it's somewhere about 46, 47 of the paid.
Of the paid gold members who pay the membership similar to PS Now.
It's believed that there's right around 46, 47 million of the paid. But there's a lot of different ways to pay for it. So that's the reason why that number, you can't really narrow it down.
Right.
Because you have your yearly subscription, people like you, like me. You know, we do the same thing for PSN. We have the yearly subscription.
Right.
That makes the most sense financially. You're spending less money. But then you also have a weird group of people that buy 3-month things.
Yeah,
and then
so they buy again and
for
again.
For both platforms.
Right, so it should equal out across the two.
And then you have a 6-month thing, I think, that's out there. And then there's also the monthly deals that people do. And then there's a large number, I've noticed, if you search eBay, of people buying like the 14-day things.
Yeah,
so it's really hard to narrow down. That number can fluctuate wildly.
Yeah.
It could be as high as 50 million. It could be as low as 40. You don't know. It could be anywhere in there. So I think that's the reason why they're kind of careful how they report those numbers.
Right. Yeah.
But 31.5, I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, that's the thing, is there's a much larger install base from what we know and speculate, because again, these numbers aren't out there from the Xbox perspective. But in our last video, we presented a very founded theory that there are, how many did we end up saying Xboxes out there?
That as of the end of the year, calculating the way the back year works, between 41 and 45, pretty much as a guarantee.
And that was based on a leak by Xbox France earlier in the year.
That was based off of...
where we did get a number.
Yeah, you're taking the number, you're extrapolating information, essentially. You're taking the number from that 36.2 as of first or second week of June. So hopefully it counts all the way through May. And then you're adding the back half of the year. But Microsoft had one of the biggest back halves of the year that they've ever had.
Right, exactly.
With the X and then the S coming out. So you could potentially add another couple million to that. They could be up to 47 million by now.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure.
So, and that's interesting because we know for sure that PlayStation's install base is 73.6 million. Mm. So you would hope with 73.6 versus, let's just make a round figure and say 45.
Yeah.
You would hope that PlayStation now has a lot more subscribers.
You would think that that would be the case.
The Xbox network.
Yes. Well, not only that, but Microsoft has only 2 platforms that people can ever really subscribe to. Right. One is 360, one is Xbox One.
Yeah. And then PlayStation has, so that's across 3, right?
Their numbers are across 3 platforms. So they have their PlayStation Portable device, they have PS3, and they have PS4, and you can download games for all 3. So a lot of people are still doing that. Mm-hmm. Some of those people might not have all 3 platforms. Some people might only have the portable, the PS3, and then download those games every month that you get for free with the subscription, and not actually have a PS4. It's very possible that's the case. Yeah.
So that's really interesting because you've got 31.5 million across 3 devices, so 10 million approximately each, versus maybe if we give the low number for the Xbox Live, the really low number is 40.
Yeah.
Across essentially 45 to 50 million.
Yeah, and again, this is speculation, so
all
keep
speculation,
that in mind.
But
we don't have the hard numbers to say for sure that this is. I would venture to say, based off of looking at the quarterly reports for both companies, that our speculation is probably pretty close to it at some point in time. Yeah. I think you and I both always try to come down a little bit under what we actually think. Our opinion is actually, it's probably even higher than what we're saying.
Right, yeah. So we take any definitive information we do get, but then we have to factor in the way that, we both have a pretty good understanding of the way that the business and the revenue works in different parts of the year, but you have to essentially take what we do know for sure, and of course that's still a leak, so it's still speculative, and then you have to put that in with what you know to be the performance. And so I would say
extrapolating the rest of the year's
information.
We're
both underestimating it a little bit.
Yeah, you always want to come in under a little bit.
But we're coming close, certainly on both. And there's definitely, even if our numbers are off a little bit, there's a stark difference between 31.5 and 40 if your install bases are not the same size. So that's interesting. What is your theory as to why? What is your theory as to, so basically what we have here, less games selling year over year. So the game sales are kind of sliding down on the PlayStation base.
The attach rate's getting worse the more consoles that are sold, at least with the console that we have the information for now.
So every time Sony updates our number of consoles out there, our number of games attached per console drops. And you have a 31.5 million access base for PS Now.
Yeah.
So what is your theory as to those two
Not
things?
Not PS Now, Network, PlayStation Network.
PlayStation Network.
Yeah.
So what is your theory as to how those are sliding down over time?
I don't know. That's all very interesting information. I'd like to hear a great variety of other people's viewpoints on this and what they think. So if you have anything to add, please comment.
Definitely.
And we'll definitely incorporate that. But I would say that a lot of these people, and these two things kind of lend themselves to each other. A lot of people that are buying PS4s are not actually using it for gaming. So my hope is that the attach rate is higher than that 9, and it's actually like 14, 15, maybe higher than that. And that there's just 20, 30 million people that have a PS4.
Aren't using it for that.
Yeah, that are using it for like streaming, like Netflix or Amazon Video or Hulu. There's a ton of other sites and apps that you can get. HBO Now. Some people, you need a device to run these apps and to watch whatever your favorite shows are on them. And I think a lot of people, because PCs are still more expensive than consoles.
Definitely.
Especially if you want one that's going to run well for a while. It's definitely going to be quite a bit more than the console. A lot of people are using their console for the internet. It's probably happening on Xbox as well, but I would think that the $199 PS4 that was out there.
Yeah, they've had some serious discounts.
Huge sales. Yeah. I think a lot of people are using them for other things, not gaming.
So they're kind of replacing the Roku. And the other little streaming devices like that, because they can do a lot more than that, even if gaming is not one of your considerations.
Well, that's the thing that factors in.
And they're coming in that price point.
Yeah, anytime you're at Best Buy or any of those electronic stores that exist, the guy that's helping you, whoever the associate is, they always mention, well, you might want to get the console because it does all those other things. Right. And if you decide you want a game, you can now game on it as well. So
yeah, definitely. So that's happening on both sides, I'm sure, because you also have the S that got discounted over the holiday. Yeah, but PlayStation definitely had not only like their Black Friday and stuff, they had another discount they did, I want to say first week of December-ish, maybe second week. They announced that another big price drop was coming.
Yeah. They did it early in November.
That's right. It was early in November. So they had several different points where they really discounted.
Yeah.
And that's been where a lot of the growth is. And it wasn't just in the back half of the year. That was also happening in the front half of the year. So perhaps that becomes, the Roku replacement, and then you have kind of 2/3 of the install base actually gaming on it, the other third not.
That would be my hope.
That's where.
Yeah, I would much rather hear that there's a bigger attach rate than 9 for the 73.
For an entire generation.
0.6, that's out there.
So that's interesting. Also interesting, kind of along the same lines, is the December NPD.
Yes.
So we kind of talked about our predictions for December.
Yeah, you actually got it right. You said that you felt that Xbox might end up beating PS4 in December NPD. I think we said this when we talked about November NPD, because a lot of people were very surprised that Xbox didn't beat PlayStation in November. We weren't. Neither of us really were, but we did think, or at least I thought, I can't remember if you thought this, that in December they would beat PlayStation. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I thought it would be very close between all three, but what sort of gave you that feeling? What made you think that would be a thing and ended up happening?
Well, there's the really silly little factual piece, and then I'll go to why I really thought that, which is there was an entire week of November missing because the X launched on the 7th of November. Yeah. So there's that tiny detail. Way bigger than that is, as the X was coming out, and, we're both involved in a lot of social media that has to do with gaming. We see a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
I just saw this crazy amount of excitement. You think about the launch of a new product, especially an expensive one. One of two things happens. They underpromise and overdeliver, and it's way more exciting once it's actually on the market than beforehand. That's what happened with the X. The other alternative, of course, is they overpromise, they underdeliver, and the hype dies down very quickly, which clearly is not what happened. So what I was noticing is tons of specs comparisons and visuals comparisons and screenshots, and people just really excited about it. Tons of word of mouth reaching into the parts of the Xbox community that weren't maybe going to get an X. They were happy with their S or their original Xbox One.
Yeah.
And then reaching into your Nintendo base, reaching into your PlayStation base. I've seen a lot of people that now that were PlayStation very much so. Now they have both.
You're talking about on Twitter, right?
Yeah, you just see this spread of excitement getting bigger after the launch. Because Microsoft really they were very excited. They really sold to us that it would do this. They were still undershooting a lot of what they were saying.
I think so, yeah.
And people were wowed because there was so much more that we got to see when we loaded up this new console than even what we thought. So then that excitement is just contagious. And by the time we did that video, I could see that had been happening for sure. Of course, then holidays come along. That's the ultimate time if people are excited about things, that they're going to buy them for other people, buy them for themselves, and so on. And I just had a feeling that it was reaching into so many areas that it really would take off by December. December was its month. November it came out. The excitement had to start to develop in week 2 and week 3 of the month.
That word of mouth thing that we've talked about, I've said it a couple times. I think I mentioned it on Crossfire when we were on there, and I said it in that video as well. I think you're right about what you're saying, because I'm always in all these groups, and I'm in a ridiculous amount of groups on social media.
Yeah.
And I don't have the time to really interact with people, so I just read the comments.
Yeah.
And it really changed. There was 4 years nearly of people spreading misinformation and saying, X can't do this, Xbox can't do that.
Right.
And even in Xbox groups, it's like you'd be surprised. These are specific to that console. Even the one platform, people were saying it doesn't do this, it doesn't that. Even with the S. The S came out in 2016, and there were people saying that it doesn't do 4K, it doesn't upscale to 4K, it doesn't output at 4K, it only does HDR, and the only reason to buy it is for HDR. Right. I literally saw people saying this, and people would get into arguments with other people, but it seemed like there was more people spreading the misinformation than ever on the correct side of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then with the X, it's different. It's not like that. People aren't lying about
the narrative
anymore.
Has changed and maybe even just lessened a little bit. There's just less buzz going around that's not accurate.
Well, somebody will ask a question and say, should I buy it? And then every comment is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There isn't a single well, maybe. It's like, no.
It's no longer a question. It took such a generational leap that there's no longer no, PS4 will do that. Nintendo Switch can do that. Yeah. It's a unique product. Nothing else is doing what it's doing.
Definitely.
So I was not surprised. I felt like that was the perfect time. I was actually a little surprised that Switch won.
Yeah, Switch ended up coming in. Well, I mean, if you look at November, that might be why Switch won in December. Switch was like pathetic from the numbers that I saw. I don't know if they were accurate or not.
Possibly stock issues or something in November as they got ready for the holidays or something.
Something like that.
But there was definitely a little wind that had to hit.
Yeah, it lost big in November. It wasn't like it came in third place close. It was back by a good 600, 700,000 units from Xbox and PS4. So it does kind of make sense that they kind of bounced back in December as people decided, hey, I guess I do want that other console that's out there, or portable if you follow a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting that it all boiled down the way it did, but it's really good news for the industry and gaming as a whole.
Definitely. So the last fascinating thing, which actually was not part of NPD, was shortly after, was the announcement of where PUBG is.
Yeah.
We've said for a while what a phenomenon.
Yeah, it's huge. It's so in under 21 days, as I understand it, which is 3 weeks, it's hit 3 million players.
3 million.
Which you gotta assume that most of those are going to be sales. So probably close to 3 million sales on Xbox, on the X, and on the S platform. So that's really interesting because if that were to continue, say that were to go on for 50 weeks or whatever, that would be on a pace that's even faster than what it's done on
the PC.
So that's
when it was
really
brand new.
Yeah, really huge numbers there. So
amazing.
No stopping that game.
That is such a classic Xbox game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the install base. They love the online with their friends multiplayer shooter. It just fits the Xbox.
Might be a good idea to release your shooter game on the Xbox platform.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So the big controversy of the last couple of weeks is the Digital Foundry video that was put out that essentially called out an indie title, Redout.
Yeah.
And said that its performance was low and...
Said it was 1080p, essentially.
Yeah, said essentially that it was 1080p, and the developer came out and said that's not accurate. What's interesting about this is something you've told me a lot of your perspective on Digital Foundry. This is normal. This is unfortunately very normal for the people at Digital Foundry. And you describe that better than I do.
Well, I think it was in our very first video, I want to say, the Project Scorpio speculations video. And so there was a lot of interesting information. I said before on the show, we talked about it with PSX, that you can watch people's reactions to things, and certain things their face will do, like little micro reactions. You can read between the lines of different things that are being said. And in particular point with their reveal that Microsoft gave them for the X, they did articles that were written that were posted up on Eurogamer, essentially. There was quite a few, and they went on for a while, for like a week or two.
After their big
maybe even longer.
Reveal.
Yes, yeah. And then they would edit things, and they'd go back and change some things, which is interesting. And then they would also do these videos that they posted up on their YouTube, Digital Foundry YouTube. And if you watch everything, and you study it, and you read all of those articles, you'll notice that they contradicted themselves many times. Yeah. There was many times where they took a spec or a bit of information that Microsoft gave them, and they really hyped it up and really said, this is big, this is great, this is bigger than a GTX 1080, this is faster than this is better than that. So they would say things like that in a combination of the videos and the articles they wrote, and then they would contradict themselves and say, well, it's actually only about a 1070 or maybe somewhere between a 1060 and a 1070, talking about the graphics cards that are out there. Some of the most powerful graphics cards that exist. And then they would also state later on, well, this is only running at 70% power of what it's eventually going to be, the GPU and the RAM in particular. They mentioned those things. Yeah. And then again later on say it's about a 1070. Well, if it's only running at 70% and it's already at a 1070, then so where's that going to put it?
That would be an inaccurate statement to say that it's...
Yeah, where's it going to put it when it's finalized, when the hardware's finalized and people have the final XDK and the updated SDKs in the future? You know what I mean? So if it's already outperforming a 1080 by your own admission, you're already saying this, where's it going to end up? Right. So how do you end your final statement with, we're putting it in between a 1060 and 1070? Right. That's what I was talking about in that video, essentially. But there was other things that they contradicted themselves. So they've been doing this for quite a while.
Forever, yeah. So they contradict themselves, and they... the only word I can ever think of, and I hate to use this word, is there's a lot of laziness in the way that they put their stuff together. Yeah. They don't work to, in just my perspective, but I've noticed they don't work to get a big, all-encompassing you know, release of what the test results were. They almost just report whatever the lowest moment was, whatever the biggest glitch that they found was, tends to be what you hear. And that's where when they do something like a specs reveal and then you see the couple of weeks that follow them, they're going to sit there and go back and forth because what they're used to is going, oh, here's the very worst moment.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's lots more clicks that you can get now.
Yeah.
If you keep putting things out, so then they start to not exactly know what it is that they're saying.
They've risen to fame and essentially profitability if they're making money off of this stuff.
Yeah.
From basically showing something in its worst light.
Yeah.
And then making people that don't know better think that that's just how that is. It just sucks. The thing is just bad.
Yeah.
They did it with Fallout 4 where there's a moment where the screenshots, it goes down to 0. There's actually a glitch that causes it to freeze for just an instant. And they said it had a frame rate of 0 frames per second.
When they well knew it was a tiny little momentary glitch.
Yes.
And that's the thing is and you know, they use that in certain areas and then they don't do that in other areas. And it's, again,
they're selective with it as well.
Inconsistent. So sometimes they'll give you the very best moment that a game had and then they'll compare a similar game in the same genre at the same period of time. They'll give you its worst moment. All of a sudden it looks like you have this massive difference when you don't.
Well, I mean, let's just take us for a moment. So we're doing kind of the same thing on a part-time basis. We analyze whatever information is out there. Right. So maybe even people that are watching this video in the comment section, I can see it happening, saying, well, you guys are doing kind of the same thing. The difference is we're going to do this with whatever information they give us. If Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft all decide to release all their numbers, we're going to completely pull apart every single bit of information they give us. We're not going to ignore one. We don't really have a bias towards one as far as numbers go. If it comes out
numbers are numbers.
If it were to come out that Xbox really undersold and really isn't doing very well attach rate wise, we're going to be
saying that.
That's surprising. We're going to try to find out why, the same way we've done in this very video with Sony's numbers and their attach rate. Yeah. So we're going to do that as far as
many facts as we have. We're going to use them, and when we use our facts, we look at multiple dimensions of it. Our goal is always to look at every side of an issue. Why might they be doing this in a favorable light? Why might they be doing it in an unfavorable light? And we always look at all the aspects. So I picture if we had the technology that Digital Foundry has, and we put out this information, it would be a much longer video so that you could say, here's what happens the majority of the time. Here's a couple of the glitches that happen. Here's a couple of the really good moments. Yeah. Here's an overall average. You know, put all the different numbers out there.
Would it be nice?
Put it all together.
In addition to that, would it be nice is that if they were to put it in perspective, they don't ever do that. They don't ever do this. Well, it was a glitch that caused it. So keep that in mind. It's not indicative of anything else.
This is a glitch that will likely be developed past when you
they found a section of a game that had more grass on one platform. And that was the story now. People are talking about this. It blows up. They get a lot of views. Yeah. And it's like, really? You're talking about grass? Does that factor into fun or anything on any level? It doesn't.
Or resolution, which is their big claim to fame of what they're comparing. I mean, that's just a little artistic design flaw that's why they do comparisons.
People that we interact with have pointed out that they've been very selective in deciding what they're going to test the resolution of. So that's interesting as well.
It is. It's interesting. They pick some things that they want to test seemingly to say, whoa, look at this awesome resolution. And other things, maybe they don't have a specific agenda or they have the opposite agenda. Yeah. And so they'll put out, oh, well, here's what it did. And you're like, no, that was like the 1 second that it really dropped for a minute, like the 0 frame rate. That shouldn't come up because it should be, hey, that's a glitch. Report that to the developer. They'll fix the glitch. That's not a 0 frame rate moment. Yeah. That's not what that actually is. And so being in the position they're in this position of people trust so much that they say because they're really the only ones that do exactly this. Yeah. And so they've become this authority on this. And yet, if you look across, a year of their information, they don't seem to have earned that authority spot because they're back and forth, up and down, contradict themselves, don't exactly know what the answers are. And so it's interesting that they've kind of ended up in the spot that they're in because they're kind of the only ones that do what they do. They just became this giant. And it's similar to other things that we've talked about before. You essentially have these sites that are basically too big to fail. Yeah. IGN being absolutely the biggest. People think that we just bash IGN, and it's really nothing to do specifically with IGN, except in certain instances. They're the biggest. Yeah. They have surpassed the size of so many entities that they should never have surpassed the size of. And essentially they've gotten to this point where They're so big that they can say whatever they want, however they want. We've talked about before that they've evolved from a little stab tossed in a headline here and there to no, blatantly, this is what we think.
It was very subtle at one point, and now
it used to be subtle, and they've gotten so big, and they've realized that their reach is in all different industries, and it's huge. And now you have IGN and other sites like IGN, Digital Foundry being one of them, saying, oh, you should stop buying this game, cancel your pre-order. They're taking pride in the fact they got people to cancel their pre-orders, and they're telling you, order this game, everybody order this game, but nobody order that game. And you've got these individuals who have 100K following a piece, and they're influencing their followers everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, you have a point. Let's look at where we are now with this, Redout situation. So the developer, 34 Big Things, issued a statement the next day saying, look, this is inaccurate information. And Digital Foundry said, oh, okay, we'll pull that down. We apologize. We'll retest it on Monday. Another week has gone by at least, and nothing's come out. They have this right to be lazy because who's going to correct them? Nobody's correcting them.
There's nobody challenging them.
And so now you have this situation where in this particular case, and this is not the first time it's happened, you put out a piece of information that's inaccurate and it buries a developer. Tiny indie developer. These people have been working really hard for a really long time. And I mean, it caused a huge fallout for them.
All of this stuff together, talking about all the different sites that you're talking about right now, they're not just affecting small developers. They're even affecting
affecting big ones, like the Battlefront thing with EA.
DICE and EA.
I mean, they literally caused the publisher to have to say
no matter what you think about that situation, no matter which information you've got, because there's two different camps of information there.
Yeah.
There's the actual truth of what really happened, and then there's a much bigger.
There's the much bigger rumor.
70% that's somebody came up with this formula on Reddit and it just blew up.
Right. But either way, should a site be allowed to have, or permitted by us to have, such a huge level of influence that a game actually has to change its design? Whether it's for one reason or another, if you ignore what that issue actually was, you have a site, you have an individual saying, everybody cancel your pre-orders, everybody boycott this game, and you're forcing these developers to have to change their entire business model.
It was several of them celebrating people, getting emails and DMs saying that they canceled their pre-order on that game. I saw them do this like on camera during a podcast, say that, that's good. I even saw people say they were going to boycott it. And then later on, you find out that they're actually the same person that boycotted to spread all this misinformation is streaming the game on the internet after they told all their people they were boycotting. So all their followers, 100,000 plus, like you mentioned, they start boycotting it and they don't buy the game. Same thing with this Redout business. It could potentially kill this little developer.
For just one moment of inaccurate information that a site bigger and more powerful than the developer decided to put out there without thinking about it.
And it appears to be what we've talked about in the past. They're pushing an agenda.
They're pushing an agenda.
There's a bandwagon for these things, and they're pushing
Absolutely. That. And you have IGN. Like, if you look over the last 3 weeks of IGN, let's look at what's happened. Well, so we'll go back a little bit further. There was the point in time where a lot of the people at IGN actually staged a boycott of IGN.
They're so big. These people, their egos are so big.
Their individual personalities are so big.
That they can just decide they don't want to work for a couple days.
They decided, we're on strike, we're not working. They put this all out on social media and pretty much bashed IGN on social media for that.
Yeah.
And they totally got away with that.
It's just okay, yeah.
And then a couple weeks ago, one of the writers for IGN put out an article, official IGN article, about the Howard Stern radio show.
Yes,
bashing the Howard Stern radio show.
Okay, so here's what's weird about that to me. Why is every article that they now do like this on something that isn't exactly gaming related, why is every single article like that negative?
Yeah,
there isn't one positive article saying the Howard Stern show has had 30-something years of success and all of these things. That's not the article. We're getting clicks now off of bashing something again and putting something down.
Yeah.
It's happening constantly.
And he even said in his article that he's a huge Howard Stern fan, always has been, continues to listen to the show every time. Contradicted himself in saying, I continue to listen to every show that comes out, but it doesn't really hold my attention anymore and I click back off of it most of the time. So do you watch it or do you not watch it?
Yeah.
And you put out this article basically saying, no, it was in its prime a very long time ago. And again, Howard Stern is obviously huge and has been for a very long time. But again, you're taking an individual and their business and what they've devoted their life to, and you're putting your opinion on it, and you're putting that opinion in front of your 100,000 followers, hoping and usually realizing the hope that they're going to follow you.
Yeah.
And then a week later, you have a political article about a political statement that was essentially against something that the president said.
Yeah, yeah. So now they're kind of, you can see them kind of trying to branch out even further.
Branch their influence into bigger, more important areas.
Yeah, it's
than where they have it now.
It's interesting. You're right when you say they're too big to fail, because there's nothing that
What's
can challenge
anybody going to do to IGN? I mean, they're the absolute biggest. They're now reaching into lots of industries to where, one industry can't really just pile up against IGN and there goes IGN, because they're in Hollywood, they're in apparently the Howard Stern radio show, they're in politics, they're everywhere.
Yeah, and it's not just IGN.
They're the big example.
They influence much smaller sites as well. Worry, shout out to Worry. He did a couple great videos where he just pulled up a couple articles and talked about how they're contradicting themselves and how they're putting this message of saying something is for something and then it's not, and then justifying over the course of 2 videos. It was great stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how does this even happen? We've talked about that in the past, where you'll see the puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
You open up one thing and it's like they're pushing one narrative. You open up the next article 4 hours later, they're pushing another one. You put it all together, it's definitely an agenda, and they're definitely pushing for clicks.
So the defenders of, there's no, there's nothing weird about the gaming media, there's no bias in the gaming media.
They're not putting lately
the puzzle pieces together to see the bigger picture.
I don't think these people have these. They're kind of like white knights. They're kind of almost social justice warrior type people.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of that.
I don't think they have the intelligence to actually put the puzzle together. Either that, or they do see it, and they're choosing
just specifically deciding to advocate something other than
they're pushing agenda against the people saying that there's a problem with all the sites. There's a problem with people that like to use the word media. There's a problem with all of that. So
very interesting, because really when you put, and it's so interesting how, and we've seen actually a couple of the people that we watch on YouTube, we've seen put together headlines.
Yeah.
And we've seen them for both sides of the narrative.
Definitely.
We've seen somebody put them together and say, see, they're not biased. And these are articles from like Forbes and like, I think it was Tech Radar, something that's very much not gaming, and they're old. Yeah. And then you have current articles from some of the bigger sites that are proving that it is there.
Yeah, like
and it's so interesting. You can assemble whatever puzzle you want, but if you assemble the whole puzzle and you factor in all of the pieces of the puzzle, which is the only fair way to do it, there is definitely an agenda. It starts with a little stab, and then somebody grabs IGN's article. Kotaku grabs IGN's article. They run with it. They make their own. They build up on it. Yeah. And then somebody grabs theirs, and they grab IGN's, and the pieces keep getting bigger. And pretty soon, you build this puzzle together. It goes from a very, less obvious narrative to a very obvious narrative. If you put it all together, the narrative they're pushing becomes obvious, even if they tried to be nonchalant, which they don't do so much anymore as they used to. But you put it all together and you can't argue on the other side. If you put it all together and you factor in everything, there's a very clear order of events of how they say things, what they put out, how they do things. Yeah. It goes in order, and before you know it, you're throwing indie developers under the rug.
You're putting people out of work.
You're putting people out of work.
Yeah.
You're telling people to cancel their game orders and their pre-orders and to not buy certain things, but to buy other things. You're helping some people and you're hurting others. All based on essentially editorial, all based on just opinions of people who have garnered followings out of this.
Yeah, that is true.
So obviously more to come on that. There's always more to come
definitely.
on that. That's one of the big things that we
a weekly
see
thing,
that we want to address weekly. So
well, I mean, you can either choose to ignore it or you can talk about it, and those are your choices, really. So
yeah, and I really hate to ignore situations like this that are as big as these are, because no matter what side you're on, there's definitely something wrong with the situation.
So we hope that people watching, hopefully it's important to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple shout outs. Fuzzy Belvedere.
Yes. Yeah.
Should have shouted Fuzzy out a long time ago.
Yes, definitely.
But I saw his support after and during Crossfire and so on, and realized, oh my goodness.
Me too.
Again, we keep realizing these, oh my goodness, this person. So let us know if you're one of those people. You can get a jump on it. We will realize you eventually. But you can let us know that we haven't.
One of the reasons why people fall through the cracks sometimes with that type of stuff is we get all those mentions at about the same time.
Yeah, they all come through right away.
To reconcile everything, immediately.
Yeah. And then Zol Gaming
Yes.
Who again was supportive to our...
Very new to finding us,
Very new to finding us. Was really supportive of some of our more controversial perspectives on Crossfire and has gone on to watch our games or our videos and so on. I read the word games. Has gone on to watch our videos.
Well, he also mentioned
really complimentary as well.
Yeah, he also mentioned in a comment that he wouldn't mind doing like a guest spot because I think he has a website or a blog or something where he writes. And so we would definitely be interested in that. And we haven't had a chance to go in and directly respond to each comment because things have been kind of crazy.
It's been really crazy.
But we will definitely do that. We're gonna update those. And get back at you guys. Thank you for the interaction. Definitely. A ridiculous amount of subscribers over the last, I'd say, 10, 15 days or so.
Yeah. Huge spike when we went on to Crossfire. And shout out to Mooch, as always, for putting us on Crossfire and putting us out there with getting our view more out there because YouTube does not favor.
It was great to go back and forth and kind of argue with some of the panel members on that.
It was a really good show. So if you haven't seen that, check that out on Mooch's channel. There's one more thing, which was the Walking Dead shakeup.
Oh, yeah. So there was a huge Walking Dead news today. Scott Gimple was promoted to Chief Creative Officer, I believe is what it is. And then Angela Kang, who's been working on the show for as long as Scott, they joined during season 2, I believe during the back half of season 2. So they've been the ones that sort of pushed it out of that weird spot that it was in the first half of season 2.
Yeah.
Where nothing was happening and they were just searching for...
they came along and shook up the story.
And they both affected change very nicely in my viewpoint from where I've been sitting. I feel like every little saga that they've done has been bigger than the last thing that they've done.
Definitely.
You can kind of put seasons 1 through 3 kind of in a box and say that it's this small little thing, and then seasons 4 and 5 were a transition period where they're getting to something bigger. And then
they got way bigger from there.
Yeah, and I feel like 6, there's a lot of people that have been criticizing the show lately because they don't see it. They don't really see the vision. They're not able to focus in on the big picture of it, I think. But if you look at 6, 7, and 8, they're telling different stories, more in-depth stories now. So it's good to see Scott get promoted there. Angela Kang's now the showrunner of The Walking Dead. And they announced that they're going to do more stuff than just the 2 shows they have.
Yeah, so hopefully more expansion in that universe, more shows.
Be nice to see like a miniseries or something like that.
And we're going to do a video at some point, several videos at some point. It's always time with us is always the problem. But about The Walking Dead, because we're obviously both huge Walking Dead fans. We're a really big fan of even some of the less favored things that have happened on the show.
I think we're actually bigger fans of the less favored seasons.
The most controversial things that have happened in the least preferred seasons have been actually our favorite. Definitely. So we see it from a different perspective. We see Walking Dead from a different perspective. And part of that is we're very familiar with who the showrunners and the executive producers and the writers and the directors are. Yeah. We pay attention to the weird things most people don't, like who directed this episode.
You see those names pop up and you're like, that name, every favorite episode I have, he's on there.
And then you start researching these people and their other work and things that they've done, and it's just... we're fascinated by these weird little details. So at some point it'll be on a separate channel. We won't put it on our gaming channel. So if you don't care about
or we'll put it on here and we'll just specify so that people know.
Yeah. So we'll put some content out there more about this to where we can build what this really means to the universe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But Scott Gimple's made a huge difference on the current Walking Dead and on Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah,
He's the one that went over to Fear the Walking Dead.
A lot of people hate that show, but season 3 was very good.
Was very good because they picked him up from Walking Dead and put him in as a
If you're a fan of Sicario, if you're a fan of the director that did that film and all the other great films that he did, I would highly recommend watching season 3. Not the best characters, not the best storyline, but the way they shot it, the music, the tension, all of that stuff, the cinematography, all of it was much better.
And it will continue to get better because they obviously couldn't come in and just create a bunch of new characters, but they will. They will build the characters.
Most likely going to do a huge time jump, a good 2 or 3 year.
Yeah, so that'll be really interesting. Yeah. So we'll do some videos about some of our perspectives on Walking Dead, some of the big people that are behind The Walking Dead. We'll do sort of a spotlight kind of thing for some of that, and then that will help build further into what this means. So an honorary mention for the time being. But when we do post that, we will either post it on a separate division of the channel or specify that it's totally about The Walking Dead, and if you're not interested, you're not interested.
Definitely.
That's it, right?
That's pretty much it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.